The thing is we can look at broken pieces and we can have this thing in us where we feel like this is beyond repair. Like it's too broken. There's nothing that God can do with it. And I think when we look in the Bible, we see that Jesus' specialty is repairing broken pieces and to make those things whole again, even when maybe they didn't initially turn out the way we thought, or left some consequences or just some hard times in our life. And so I want us to look at the story of the woman at the well. And it's in John chapter 4. And what we see is that Jesus is traveling with his disciples, and he comes through this village, and it's the 6th hour, which in Bible time is apparently noon. So it's noon, and so he comes to this well. He's hot and he's thirsty, and he encounters a woman who's also come to the well at noon, and she's gathering water. And this is interesting because in those times, women, that wasn't the time you gathered water. Noon was the heat of the day. It was hot. And so all the women of the village would have gathered water early in the morning. So the fact that this woman was coming at noon tells me that she really didn't want to be with the other women for other reasons. Maybe they talked about her. Maybe she felt ostracized. She just didn't feel like she belonged. And so we find her at the well at noon gathering water. And Jesus says to her, "Will you give me a drink?" And I think that's so simple because you think, here's this woman. She knows that she's just encountered this Jewish man. She's a Samaritan. So first of all, she knows that they shouldn't even speak to each other. And then you think this is a woman who is gathering water at a time when the other women in the village aren't, because I think she's so used to feeling like an outcast. So to have somebody just even say something to her as simple as, "Will you give me a drink of water?" was probably a kindness that she really hadn't experienced in a long time. And so what we see is Jesus is waiting there and he speaks to her. And why is he waiting there to speak to her? Why did he stop at this well that day? Because he loved her. It's that simple. And I think sometimes we make it really complicated, like there's all these steps that we need to do, or these broken pieces of our life that we don't feel like Jesus can redeem or that we can't bring to him. But I think that's why he always seeks us out, no matter how lost or broken we may be, no matter how far we've run, no matter how much we've tried to escape him. He always comes back to us, and he finds us wherever we are, wherever our well is at noon, where we feel shunned and lost and broken. And he finds us there because he loves us and because he doesn't want us to stay broken. And the story of the woman at the well has always resonated with me because I identify so much with that feeling of just being lost and broken and just waiting for somebody to meet me where I was. My senior year in college, I was probably a little aimless. I was a liberal arts major. I was on scholastic probation, so I was either going to graduate or get kicked out of school, was pretty much where I was. I didn't have any big career goals. I didn't know where I was headed. So I met a boy, and we got engaged, and everything seemed like that was going to be the answer. We were going to get married right after graduation. It was going to be perfect. This is what I needed. This was going to be the thing that was going to ground me and bring my life all back together. And in the way God has of working things out in your life, his parents sent us to this marriage conference, this Christian marriage conference for engaged couples. And it became so clear to me as I sat at that marriage conference that I absolutely could not marry this guy. It was going to be the wrong decision. It wasn't the right thing for me. He wasn't who God had for me. And so I knew that I had to break off that engagement, but I didn't want to. And it was so hard, and I felt so lost in that time. And so we had a couple of times where I would try to break things off, and then I couldn't, and it was just so hard. And finally, I found myself in my little Honda CRX outside of the baseball field at Texas A&M, crying in my car, just saying, "God, if you will help me get out of this, I will turn my life back over to you, and I'll do what it takes. If you'll just help me, I'm so broken and I'm so lost." And I got back to my house later that afternoon, and that guy and I had a huge fight, and he said, "Then give me back the ring." And it was like I was free in that moment. And I'll never forget it because it was just the beginning of me feeling like God saw me. And a couple of nights later, I was reading this book by Max Lucado called No Wonder They Call Him the Savior. And in it, he tells the story of this prodigal daughter. And the mom has been looking for her daughter, and she's been searching. And the mom finally finds her and says, "No matter what you've done, no matter what you've become, please come home." And it resonated because I thought that's what Jesus is telling us in our brokenness and our loss. He wants to meet us with kindness. And he just wants to say, "Will you give me a drink of water?" So Jesus has a conversation with her. It's simple. He doesn't turn water into wine. He doesn't perform a miracle. He doesn't raise anybody from the dead. He speaks to her and says, "Will you give me a drink of water?" And Jesus simply speaking to her in that moment reminds me of when God spoke to Elijah in 1 Kings in chapter 19, where it says there's a great and powerful wind, tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord wasn't in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord wasn't in the fire. But after the fire came a gentle whisper. And sometimes God speaks to those still, small places in us, just like Jesus spoke just in a still, small way. He showed up to this woman who was looking for healing and significance and security, who had been an outcast and felt like she was broken beyond repair. And so as the conversation progresses in John, what we see is the Samaritan woman, after she's asked for a drink, she says to Jesus, "You are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." And she said, Sir, the woman said, "You have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water?" And so she's curious and she asks him, and I think what she's saying is, where can I get this water? Because you know what? I'm tired of coming back to this well. I'm tired of coming to this well in the heat of the day and at noon and feeling shunned, and I'm tired of life and I'm broken and I'm hurt. And so what do you have to offer me? What are you offering me and where can I get it? And so Jesus says to her in that way that he has of cutting right to the heart, which you know if you've felt it, he does it, where he looks at her as she says that and he says, "Go get your husband." Okay, well, this is awkward, Jesus, because I don't have a husband. So what he says to her is, "You are right. You say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands and the man you have now is not your husband. What you've said is quite true." And here's the thing about the woman at the well. I don't know her life circumstances. I don't know what brought her to be at a point in her life where she's had 5 husbands and she hasn't had now. I don't know if she's been widowed. I don't know if these men have left. I don't know the thing. Here's what I know is as little girls, none of us think, you know what I really would like is to someday end up with 5 husbands. That would be an ideal life scenario for me. There's no Disney movie about, you know what, you end up with 5 princes over the course of your life. So what that tells me is that she's probably felt broken and used and abused. She's felt left and abandoned, that she's felt grief and sadness. And Jesus sees all of that. But what he does with her is what he does for all of us. He's not going to sit and make conversation with her about water. He's going to go right to the heart of what is it? Where are you broken? Where can I heal you? Where do you need something? Where can I add to your life? Where can I heal you and make you whole? Where can I take these broken pieces and put them all back together? And what she says, because it becomes uncomfortable, is he sees her with this like, yeah, that's right, you have no husband. You've had 5 husbands. And she comes back with, "I perceive that you are a prophet," which if that were me would be really smart alecky. So that's kind of why I just said it that way. Like, okay, smart guy, I see, you get the whole story. But it's because she feels all of a sudden she's so vulnerable and she's so exposed, and that's what it's like. When all of a sudden Jesus comes face to face and confronts us with our brokenness, it feels awkward and painful. And what do we do with it? Am I going to trust you and let you come in and heal those broken places in me, or am I going to hold them close and continue to just live in my hurt and my brokenness? And so ultimately, as they talk about, will we worship on this mountain or that mountain, and they go on all these rabbit trails, she ends with probably trying to cut the conversation out. Well, the Messiah is coming and we can ask him. And I don't know if what Jesus said then blew her mind, but I think it probably did, where he says, "I am him." And so to me, what we see in this story is that Jesus is the only thing that really fills us up. We go through life and we try to find all these things that we think are going to be the thing that fill us. Maybe when we get a certain degree of education, when we get a certain job, when we have a certain amount of kids, when our kids achieve this thing, when we get this promotion, when we get married, whatever that thing is, and we're just waiting for all these things that we think are going to fill us. And then there we are in our brokenness, looking for that thing, and Jesus shows up and we say, "What is it?" And he says, "I am him. Guess what? I'm the Messiah. I can give you living water. You'll never be thirsty again." And you know what? In that moment, if we'll accept it, if we'll really take that in, then he can heal whatever is broken in us and realize that we're never too far gone for him and he wants to meet us where we are. And here's the thing I love about the Samaritan woman, and it's like so many of us, when we have been changed by his kindness and his love, we can't help but run to tell others what has happened to us. And that's exactly what we see her do, is Jesus meets her where she is. He has this conversation with her. He meets her with kindness. All these little small pieces of her life that she's been looking for meaning and purpose and to know that she still matters, and she finds it. And the first thing is she wants to go run and tell everybody about it. She wants to share the news. She wants to spread the kindness and say, you know what? Like all of us, it's like Amazing Grace. I once was lost and now I'm found, and here's what has happened to me. And to me, what's so remarkable about that is you see the change that Jesus makes, that in this one short story, in the course of maybe 30 minutes at a well in the middle of the day, that Jesus met her and he changed her, that she went from a woman who didn't want to go get water at noon because she wanted to avoid the crowds, because she didn't want to be seen, to somebody who actively and purposefully ran into the town to say, you aren't going to believe what has just happened. And don't you know that, like all of us, don't we get afraid that there are going to be eye rolls and people are going to be like, I knew you. I know who you are. I know how broken you are. I know you have 5 husbands. But she didn't care, because that's what Jesus does when we begin to see ourselves in his eyes, and the way he heals us and the way he uses the broken pieces of our life. He makes us whole. And what we want to do is use that to make a difference in our world and in our community and in our lives. And like the woman at the well, I think when Jesus comes in and changes your life, and when he heals what was broken, it changes you to the point that you want to go back and tell others your story. You want to share what you found. You want to let other people know about the living water. And I think back to who I was at 21 years old after I broke off that engagement. And, I'd like to say that I had that moment in my car and that transformed me. And I read the Max Lucado quote. And from then on, it was just me and Jesus. But it was rough. It was rough to find my footing. It was rough to figure out where I was going next. I'd fallen into a lot of bad patterns. And so my knee jerk to me was to kind of go back to some of that stuff. And so I was trying to figure out, where do I fit back in this world? Where do I go? I kind of felt like all my friends were the people that I liked to go drink with and hang out with. And the boys I wanted to date were the ones that were not the ones I ought to be dating. I'd just fallen into these bad patterns, and I didn't really know how to get out of it. And so I was lost and didn't really know where to go. And I knew I needed to change things in my life, but I didn't know how to change it. And that's when my friend Jen, who was my college roommate, came to me one night and she said, you need to go to this Bible study with me. It's called Breakaway. And so I went, and I didn't know what to expect, and I felt like it was going to be weird, and I felt like people were going to see me, and they were going to judge me, and they were going to be able to see who I was, and that I was going to be ostracized. But I walked in, and it was led by a guy named Greg Mott, and he was my age. And even though I had grown up in church, I sat and listened to him talk about the grace and mercy of Jesus, and how he loves us no matter what, and how he wants us to shine like stars in the universe. And something in me broke wide open. And in that moment, I didn't care who was looking. I didn't care that I sat there and cried. I didn't care that I didn't look cool at all. Because just like that woman at the well, it was like Jesus reached into my heart and he changed everything in me. And I look at Jen doing that small, simple thing of getting me to go with her to this Bible study. And I'm like, it was so reminiscent of Jesus going up to the Samaritan woman and saying something as simple as, will you give me a drink of water? And so we never know when we're going to have that opportunity, that encounter, to completely offer somebody what we've found and how it's going to change them and change their life. And so it gives us a reason to look around us and go, where are people hurting? Where do people feel lost? Where can I run back into town? What's my town? Where can I go and share what Jesus has done for me? Where are all the small places that God would have me take broken pieces of somebody's life and help them find out how to put them back together and be the treasure that they never imagined they could be?
Good stuff. I could relate to a whole bunch of that. I don't know about y'all.